Thank you so much for being here. For people who are watching this later as part of the training program, this video is a conversation between two Indigenous knowledge keepers, an Indigenous competency training program coordinator, and myself, who's the lead of a trials training program. We're talking about how to design and run clinical trials in ways that are more respectful and responsive to First Nations, Inuit, and Métis participants. I'd also like to acknowledge the advice and wisdom of Dr. Malcolm King, who continues to teach us a great deal. He kindly reviewed our materials, but was unable to join us today. I want to start by saying very clearly, I have a lot to learn. I'm really grateful to you, as Indigenous knowledge keepers, for this training program, for your time, your advice, and your guidance today. I thought we could begin with some brief introductions. I'll introduce myself first and then invite each of you to introduce yourselves. So my name's Amit Garg. I'm a kidney physician and I'm serving as the lead of this training program in clinical trials, which is carried out on the traditional territories of First Nation, Inuit, and Métis peoples from coast to coast. We are very thankful to be able to work and collaborate on these lands. And maybe Elder Mary, I'll turn it over to you.
Hi, good afternoon. My name is Ogamake Pematitnai Hiskanawa, and I am kin to the wolf, and I am a shaman and a healer and a knowledge keeper. And I'm very glad to be here with you. In English, what that means is it's like the grandmother or person of older status that watches over and helps people on their journey in all four directions. So my job on this earth is to help people all over the world. And so that's one of the reasons I am a part of this. Thank you.
Tansenin buju esiquedish nakas makwani dudem. Discutchoning sugar winnipeg nidunji. And good day, everybody. I introduced myself to you in my language, which is Anishinaabe one. And I'm from the Ojibwe Nation, the Anishinaabe Nation in my language. And I'm joining this teaching today from my traditional territory, the ancestral territory, and Treaty 1 territory in Winnipeg, Manitoba. And I live here. I don't work anymore. I'm retired. I'm a retired educator, but I love living here in my territory. My home territory, though, is actually Saskatchewan, which is Dauphin River, which is about 4.5 hours northeast of Winnipeg. I'm a mother to 2 adult sons, to 3 grandchildren, and a partner to my husband, Charlie. And I mentioned earlier that I'm a retired educator, but I'm also recognized as a knowledge keeper here in my home territory, and also a bundle carrier and a grandmother, and working with different areas of the community. Miigwech, thank you.
Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Linda Harvey Ryu, and I'm the Indigenous Cultural Competency Coordinator for the Pragmatic Trials Training Program. I live in St. Thomas, Ontario, and I am a sister, a wife, a mother, and a grandmother to 5 grandchildren. My background is in the arts, communications, and education as an educator and as a consultant.
Well, thank you again, everyone. So let's get into the content of today. In clinical research, there are many different kinds of trials. Some trials are designed specifically with and for Indigenous communities. They're grounded in community priorities, Indigenous governance, and Indigenous ways of knowing. Those trials have very particular considerations, and we're not talking about those today. What I'm hoping we can focus on is a different group of trials. Large randomized trials that enroll people with a certain health condition from many sites, across cities, provinces, and even sometimes across countries. In those trials, only a small proportion of the participants, say less than 5%, would identify as Indigenous. Yet even when the numbers are small, it really still matters how we involve Indigenous participants and how we handle their data, and how we think about benefit, trust, and fairness. There's a growing body of work that talks about why diverse trial participation matters, and a few themes really resonate with me. When we run trials, we should aim to generate new knowledge that actually improves care and health, contribute to helping earn and build trust, especially given the history of harms and abuses in healthcare and research that have understandably created deep mistrust among Indigenous peoples with the research community, and to promote fairness so that when we say this treatment works, those conclusions are based on evidence that includes Indigenous peoples if those treatments are going to be used in Indigenous peoples. To me, fairness includes having effect estimates that actually reflect the type of participants, including Indigenous participants, so that everyone can see themselves in the evidence and feel more comfortable that the results are legitimate and relevant to them. I also want to acknowledge that trying to do better in the shadow of colonization, racism, and ongoing injustice can feel very heavy. It can be hard to know where to start or whether the steps we're taking are enough or even helpful. On top of that, many pragmatic trials don't have a commercial sponsor, and the trial teams are often working with limited resources. That doesn't remove our responsibilities, but it does shape what is realistic and what we need to prioritize. So today I'd like to share a few concrete things we've been trying to do in our pragmatic trials, certainly not as a perfect model, but as a starting point. Then I'd really value your guidance on what seems helpful, what doesn't, and what we might be missing. So here are the 7 steps we've been taking so far. First, how do we even show up as a trial team? When you lead a trial, people look to you for some confidence and clarity. That's part of building trust. But at the same time, we think it's crucial to stay open, humble, and willing to learn, and to change course when we hear that something we're doing isn't right or is causing harm. So we're trying to honor both confidence in running a trial and humility in how we listen and respond. The second is cultural safety and competency training. We ask members of our trial team to complete training like OCAP principles and SANYAS Indigenous Cultural Safety Training, and to participate in activities like the Cariosis blanket exercise. These by no means are complete solutions, but they help us with a shared foundation and some understanding of historical and current contexts. The third is including Indigenous voices on the trial team. Whenever we can, we've tried to include Indigenous peoples on the trial team. In some of our previous trials, First Nations patients have been patient partners, have helped guide the work, and author the papers with us together. Some participating sites also now have Indigenous health teams, and we've been reaching out to ask for advice, invite collaboration, and hear concerns when we're conducting research in those areas. The fourth is reviewing and adapting patient-facing materials. For consent forms and patient information sheets, we ask Indigenous partners to review them. We want to know, is the language respectful? Is anything confusing, misinterpretable, or potentially triggering? For some trials, we've translated written materials into Indigenous languages, like Ojibwe Cree, Mohawk, and Ojibwe. And we've made audio or spoken versions available on the trial website. The fifth is ethics and governance. For multi-center trials, we usually go through a provincial body for pan-provincial ethics approval, and there are emerging new national processes as well. But when a participating site serves a large number of Indigenous patients and has its own local research ethics board or Indigenous research governance process, we've also submitted there specifically to get input from people with Indigenous expertise. The sixth, and this is a challenging one for us, is reflecting and struggling on the benefits of collecting and reporting identity data. One area where we're still unsure is collecting information on race, ethnicity, and Indigenous identity. On one hand, if we don't collect the data or report this data if it's available, we can't show that Indigenous participants were in the trial. That feels like a missed opportunity. On the other hand, There are very important OCAP principles around ownership, control, access, and possession of data involving Indigenous peoples. We also worry about the risk of stigmatization. For example, if a trial reports that a high proportion of participants with a certain health condition are Indigenous, how that information is presented and interpreted really matters. Others have noted the need to strike balance between Indigenous peoples' rights and the authority of Indigenous governance structures to steward and make decisions about data, and the rights of an individual Indigenous participants to take part in a clinical trial and to self-identify in ways they choose. So we've been reflective on all these things and yet remain uncertain about the right approach. And finally, seventh, sharing back results in an accessible way. When a trial is complete, we're trying to move beyond just a journal article. We're working on plain language summaries and other patient-facing materials, and in some cases, translating them into multiple languages so the findings can be shared more broadly and in more accessible ways. So these are some of the things we've been doing in our pragmatic trial so far. I'm not presenting them as the right ways to do things, and I'm sharing them because I really appreciate your honest advice. I'd be grateful to hear which of these approaches feel respectful or useful, which ones might be problematic or things you think we should stop or change, and what's missing. What would you like to see trials teams do of when Indigenous participants are included in large trials? And we're very grateful, and I'm very grateful for, again, you being here and for willing to guide us. My hope is that future trials can be done in ways that uphold Indigenous values, help build trust, and contribute to truth and reconciliation.
All right. So, I would like to say something. I would like to share a little bit about the first question that you had on your list. You see, when you're doing things with an Indigenous way of knowing and being, you become family. So when you're working, it changes the playing field when you are looking at your patient or your coworker or your student as a family member. It changes the dynamics and it makes it much more approachable, friendlier, and absolutely more acceptable. And that's one of our baseline ways of doing things is that we have that belief that we are related to everything and everyone, that we are not separate. So when you hear us say to you, to all our relations, that is inclusive to you and all of your family as well. So it's very important that that attitude is adopted, and that because that'll also take care of some of the power dynamics that often happen in medical places. So I think if we share that information and we just shift that thinking just a little bit, I think we'll do quite well. I think you've got that first one. I can start with that one. Helen, what do you think?
Mhm. The one thing I was going to say is that I know what Dr. Garg just talked about is around the seven ways of the seven steps that have
Yes.
happened throughout the pragmatic trial. But I think there's one. I know I'm kind of jumping ahead a little bit about I don't know if it's missing, but I think there's one step even before the trials began, and I think you might have um, forgot about this or really didn't see it as part of the trials. But one of the things that Dr. Garg did do even before the trials began is he had a team work with him on drafting even the proposal. I'll call it that. I don't know in medical terms what you call it, but I'm an educator and we use proposals or abstracts. And so even
Protocol.
before all of this, even before all of this, he involved us as knowledge keepers, to provide him input. And he also had a cultural competency manager from another network. And to me, like that really speaks volumes for even before the research begins. And I think when you involve, like he involved knowledge keepers and someone from the community, and even involving maybe others who were because this is not only one type of research, even though Dr. Garg is a kidney physician, but maybe some patient partners that were undergoing have been involved in other research. So I think to me that's a lot of credit, to Dr. Garg, is that involving us as knowledge keepers, as Indigenous people as well, that we helped him shape as well too the proposal before it even began. So I just wanted to mention that, Dr. Garg, in terms of your work, and I think to me, like, that's very respectful, because we don't see a lot of that happening, where people actually right at the onset, right when it's at the visioning or at the idea stage, where we are involved as Indigenous people. So I just wanted to say that. But when we look when we look at all of these approaches, to me, these approaches are things that I'm really happy to say that were learned in this particular trial. And I really think that that first one, like showing up as a trial team, and getting to know some of the researchers over the last year, and the openness for many of them. We've had conversations with many of them, myself, Linda, and Mary. And they do come with that openness. They come with that willingness to learn. And I think to me, like, that's really important. Because even though we're learned people, we don't know everything. And so I think based on our experiences as Indigenous people involved in research and other research areas, I think that I have to say I'm really I really admire that in this trial team, that they came with that humility, they came with that willingness and openness and respectful ways to learn. And I think sometimes too, some were kind of shy as well too, to ask questions. But I think that's one thing that researchers can be more aware of, is not to be shy to ask questions. Because we try to make that environment safe, and that people will be not shy, or oh, I'm gonna ask this question, but it kind of sounds like I really should know this, but I don't. And so we really try to build those environments and that space where people can feel comfortable to ask questions that they don't know, and that we're there to help them. And if we can't help them, then we find somebody else who can.
I think you're right on the number with that, Helen. And one of the other things that I'd like to make a comment about is that I have watched this team work in cooperation and inclusivity, with kindness at the base of everything that they're doing, instead of doing things in a way of top down. It has been done in a very, 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 very humble and balanced way. I've seen a lot of balance with this. I've seen a great deal of respect. And Amit, you've done a very good job with this. And I think if you continue to do the work that when you continue to do the work that you're doing with this research, I think that you're on track, and I think you've got a lot going for you. On that seventh question, can you just repeat that to me for one moment, Amit? Can you just say it to me? The seventh one, the seventh teaching, the seventh teaching,
The second question?
seventh, the seventh, number seven.
Oh, the seventh
The,
teaching. Okay.
the
Yeah.
seventh, and maybe can Elder Mary, would it be okay if I just reflect on some of the things I'm hearing, and then I can talk about the
Yeah.
seventh part?
Yes.
I think what I'm hearing is that we have a trials training program, and what I'm hearing is the way we approached um, partnership in the trials training program to deliver this education, trial teams should do the same thing when they're developing each of their individual trials. Use
Correct.
that same kind of approach, as you mentioned, Helen, at the very beginning, um, even before step one, really engaging respectfully, um, seeing what would work, um, see how it would be perceived, and then going along these other steps. That's what I kind of heard one consideration. And it's really just an approach, like just being open-minded and like you're saying, approaching this with a partnership with humility that you don't know everything, but you're trying to learn and asking questions. And trial teams should do that when they're trying to do their own trials. And if they, um, with in good faith, they get something wrong to learn from it and still continue trying and doing the best they can with an open heart, open mind type approach. In terms of the steps, like these are just some steps we've taken. The last one was when we complete the trial, sharing back the information in a way that can be useful to people who will be um, using the knowledge. And so typically the medical community will publish in a medical academic journal. We're now trying to, beyond that, share information in ways that they're accessible to citizens and patients, and making sure that when we do that, it's also culturally appropriate and has been reviewed and been given as like the advice from indigenous knowledge keepers or other experts in First Nations and Inuit Métis healthcare have looked at these materials and feel that they're sensible. And that also applies to the trial materials too, like during the course of the trial, the beginning of the trial, any information that's been given to people during the trial, and at the end, the overall summary of the results that are given to like broader individuals, like we use that approach. So that's what the step seven is one thing we've been doing, Elder Mary.
And I have to say that I really do like that step because we, as part of those earth teachings, we embrace the sharing circle. We embrace that shared information, and that to me is very appropriate. I've watched throughout this whole time that we have been putting different pieces together that teach those earth-based teachings, and that's sharing, and that what I would say is your sharing circle and the knowledge that you can give to others. And I think that'll really increase that awareness. And I see that the knowledge that you have been looking for from us and others has been very respected and implemented in the way you're doing things, even using that word sharing, that we're sharing that information rather than we're putting it together or whatever. It's that sharing. That's quite beautiful, and I think that it is appropriate for sure.
Mhm.
And maybe reflections on the sixth one, where um, again, an area we've struggled with is collecting information on race, ethnicity, and Indigenous identity. So, for
Right.
example, if we were doing a trial and we had a survey with some baseline information, is it appropriate for us to um, have ask someone whether they're interested in identifying as Indigenous or not, and they can also not decide to answer that question. In this kind of setting where we have, potentially thousands of patients or sometimes tens of thousands of patients, um, and then that data would be managed similar to the rest of the trial data. So it doesn't have special protections around it, but we would treat it with respect. And then typically it's used to report just the characteristics of people who were in the trial. I think we have to be mindful if we start saying, does the effects of the treatment differ in groups? But even there, it might be appropriate to do so. Like maybe if it's like, let's say it's an intervention to help people with their mental health. That intervention might not have been designed in a way that it's optimal for indigenous participants. And so then that could give you insight is that you really should go back and get more consultation. But I think if you're doing those kinds of analyses, you do really want to do that in partnership and collaboration and be guided in doing them. So I'll stop there, but those are the some of the issues and considerations that come up, and it's a very challenging area that we reflected on what the right approach is.
Well, I think everybody has the right to their autonomy, and I think people would tell you whether or not they wanted to share that information. One of the things that I think the study is going to do, though, is create a sense of safety. So instead of people being afraid, because because of the history, a lot of people are still afraid to say I have indigeneity or I am First Nations. There's still a lot of people that don't want to do that because of the racism. But I think with this, I think it gives them the hope. I think it gives them the space and the platform to be safe enough to share if they choose. So I think that that's a good thing to do is to give them the choice to share. Because if you don't give them the choice to share, it's like you're not acknowledging that there's a possibility with you, with me, with whoever, because we're a family. Back to that family thing, right? So, I think that it gives that safety, and you might have a lot more. I would think that you will have a lot more success. It might take some time for people to say, "Well, I didn't tell you, but my mother or my father." So I think that that gives them that platform, as I said, that place where they might feel comfortable and a lot more at ease with sharing with the way things are being done with these trials. Yeah.
I've also found as well too that some people, some patient partners might be hesitant to also, um, you know,
Hmm.
say that they are Indigenous because sometimes what happens too is that people are not aware of what the research is about. And I like how you said, like when you're sharing back results using plain language, because sometimes if and this is really good for the trial teams to know is that be clear and articulate um, when you are approaching, patients who are going to be participating in your research trials. And because if they understand, one of the things that if they understand that there could be a benefit to them if they're ones that will be getting the treatment, or even if they're not, that because it's really important to articulate that as well to patients, like what is it is it going to benefit them, and as well to after the results are shared, um, as well to like sharing that information about how that particular intervention either helped them or not or didn't. And I know what you're saying too, Amit, about small, like when we have small population, small data. And I know that in my previous work that if there were people who could be identified, we didn't share that data because if the population was too small in that particular community, it could be it just wasn't respecting their I guess anonymity in the research trial. So that's one thing that I've learned is in the sector that I worked in. But I think that nowadays in current research, I think that there's been a lot more education done. Um, with researchers in various disciplines. And I think that a majority are becoming more knowledgeable about how to work with Indigenous communities. And so I would hope that they would, talk to that trial teams would talk, to potential um, individuals being used in their research. And yeah, because it, because it, the research is really important. I've always been one to support research, not only myself as a participant, but also my children participating in research in in the area that we're really uh, concerned about is with kidney health. But I know that this is not only for kidney health; it's all across all other areas. But I think that one, if it's explained, the purpose, what its benefits will be, and I think it's good to I think it's good information to share because I know, for example, here in our province in Manitoba, we have a very high incident of diabetes amongst the Indigenous population. And I think if we didn't know that, then because we need so many different interventions, and I speak as well too of a person that lives with type 2 diabetes. And I never ever thought that I would be a person who was diagnosed with type 2 diabetes. So participating in research is really important for me to know what are those things that those interventions that can be helpful to me, i.e. checking my blood, my blood sugar, those types of things. So yeah, so that's what I think about this in terms of benefits of collecting or reporting on identity. And there's so much work that's being done in this area. I know even with the pragmatic trials training here, we had some really awesome speakers that Linda, organized, who talked about, Indigenous data sovereignty and how to work with. And, hopefully, Linda, that was something you're going to talk about. I don't want to steal your thunder. But anyway, I think those are really important as well too for trial leaders to hear that video series.
Thank you.
And there's one more thing I need to
Oh no,
say.
please, please, please.
Okay, so there's one more thing because Helen reminded me of one of the reasons why it's so very important um, to do this work is because it will create that safety because of the experimentation that was done on our people, because it was and people were and still are quite afraid to get involved. But when you're so clear like this, it makes it a safer place. As I said, then it becomes much more holistic. So hats off to you. You're doing a great job, and I think you're right on track, Amit. Your team is doing really good work.
Well, thank you so
And
much for your guidance. Um,
Linda's been very persistent with us, so that's been very good. She's been a good wrangler.
and so maybe I just might just say one thing I really reflected on what you were saying, Helen, is that if you are collecting identity information, perhaps at the bottom of it, say how it's going to be used and
Yes.
honor that. And so we're using this, for example, simply to report the types of backgrounds of people in the trial. And that's all it'll be used for. Maybe just be very clear about that. Or we're going to use it also because we want to see if the effects differ in certain types of people. If you're going to do that, make that clear and make that um, once you say that, just honor how you're going to use it. Maybe that also is an additional level. Typically on a survey, you just have the information, but for this particular information, maybe describe how it's going to be used.
Hmm.
Um,
Exactly. And I think using plain language, because not everybody is most of us are fairly intelligent, but, sometimes we don't understand a certain language of a certain, discipline. And so same thing here, medical jargon. I know I'm always very cautious as well too, and I used to speak in educational terms. So same thing, use that plain language and explain, like don't assume people know what you mean. So yeah.
Excellent.
Well, thank you so much. I think that brings our session to a close, and maybe Linda, I might ask you if you have a few reflections to make, and then we can close the session.
I think I'm pretty impressed with everything I've heard. It's so wonderful to hear both Helen and Mary speak to what we've been doing for the last 2 years. Did you call me a wrangler? I think you might have. Uh,
Been out
but it,
with wild horses.
I
So
love
yes, I call you wrangler. You're a good wrangler.
I love
Yes.
it. That was very sweet. No, it's been an amazing thing, and I know that in talking to both of you and sharing all of this information and us getting the opportunity to speak to our learners, which we've only just started to do. We've met with one, and there's three more to meet with. They were so wonderful. I completely agree with Helen when she said they were warm, they were respectful, they had questions. I really felt like, okay, 2 years into this, they really have a sense of relationship and that we are a family and that for them to be involved in research, they need to be that. I think a lot of them are already warm and friendly to begin with, so I think they have a real sense. But I do feel like they've learned that, and I just get that from our interaction with them, and what a joy it's been to work with everyone,
Mhm.
but definitely with you and Helen together for the last 2 years. So thanks for the experience. It's wonderful to be part of this family.
Well, well said, Linda, and it's wonderful that the new trial leaders, the next generation who are going to do these trials, are having this experience and are interacting this way. That's really wonderful to hear. And so, on that note, we can bring the session to a close. And again, I just want to thank Helen and Elder Mary for all your wisdom and guidance and reflecting on some of the things we're doing to try to be reflective and conducting trials that are inclusive and culturally safe.
Awesome.
Thank you, Dr. Garg.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye, Kat.
Blessings.